So today we are all about knockouts, and we are going back to knockouts because there were practically no knockout specific situations during the last knockout session we did. And because there were practically no knockout specific situations, the session was pretty much like every 9 max sit and go session should be. But it's nice to see that there are at least 3 guys that didn't notice that I didn't have my microphone on. In the top right, the queens are an easy open. I think I'm practically opening pretty much any pocket pair when we are having such stack depths still. And last week we didn't have a session. I was traveling, but now I'm back and we are doing a session this week, and we are doing it practically week by week. So next week we are going to have an English session on Sunday, but as usual I don't yet know what it should be about. And with the beautiful pair of queens we got absolutely nothing. In here we are doing a bit of an aggressive open, but because of the big blind that's the most likely to call is sitting out, we can open pretty much any two from even from the cutoff in that situation. Now I remember also to mute the sounds from the poker tables, because I know that there are some people that are playing at the same time, and it's going to be pretty annoying to play at the same time. And in here with the pair of eights we could also have just called. And I should have bet a bit more. Like 150 would have been a better bet size. This board is quite dead, and there is practically just one draw. And there is a guy that has limp called and he's re-raising me. This is an interesting situation all in all. I think in general that my opponent is going to have a one pair hand pretty often, and he has just limp called. He might have limp called with some small pocket pairs. It would be practically a tell if the guy would be a reg and there would be an opponent just limp calling with it. But pocket queens, I don't like his limp call, but he got pretty much the maximum value out of it. On the river when the ace hits, I'm not beating anything. It would have been practically a set on the Smearkazen if it would have been in a situation that the guy would have been a reg. But when he's not a reg, and in here our sevens are counterfeited, do we get the pot like one in a 4 times with queen high? I think we do. And he got king high that he value bet on the river. That's nasty. But if it would have been a reg that limps on the early position, on the early game, limps on early position, calls a small raise, it's just going to be a set every time on a 7-4 deuce board. But against a random, it's a completely different story. It would have been a really nasty situation as well. In here in a small blind, we are going to complete. With 9 queen, we are going to have some some pretty good hits on the board. And we need to pay so little, so it's going to be an easy hand to play, and now it practically plays itself. With tens, it's going to be a more solid of a raise than the eights, but I think that they are going to be pretty close in equity, the eights compared to raising and just flatting. They are going to be close together in value. I misclicked. I'm misclicking a lot. It's my first poker in a week, so I'm feeling rusty already with only 6 tables going on. In here there is no good card for us in the deck, so we are going to give this pot up no matter what happens. And these knockouts, they were a better game when we did these, like, even against a 30 chip bet, we get so insane odds, and we might be good with our ace high, even though it's unlikely, but when it's only 30 chips to a pot of, the pot odds we have here are insane. Can we be against 2 ace highs or an ace high and a king high? It's really rare, but this is something like a 7% pot odds situation. Our opponent did go for maximum value of his idiot straight with the minimum bets. That's like, I think the opponent is setting himself up to practically lose the most, because I think that if he bets small, he's going to be calling a re-raise and gaining for the least when opponents are not having anything. And as Calleon says that you have sometimes repped a set with a pre-flop limp call on such boards. Problem is that regs have a hard time to give up an overpair. I think that's pretty much the problem, that it's not only that you'll limp call and then you'll steal the pot always, but you'll also need to hit a board that will have a lot of small cards. And if an opponent would have a solid ace, I think they are going to be pretty hard pressed to give it up. In here with the Jack-10 suited, it's a solid hand, and we are getting to play a pot against one of the worst players, if not the worst player in the table. So I'm trying to isolate him, and playing a pot with him with a solid hand is going to be a great outcome for us, no matter what. So I think this is also something that with early game, when we are having enough chips, we can play hands with the worst players on the table, and we can isolate them quite freely when we have position and there are not a lot of players behind us. I think that is a point that some players are missing a lot of value in. And Neo has my thought about knockouts. A lot of value leaks in these games in the micros, because too many people collide with wide ranges all in early, and they take some of the prize pool with them. Players with reasonable all-in ranges won't get the equity, the people who shove fives and call king-9 off. I think you are only noticing one part of the the more people are colliding, the more likely you are getting to the value, so you are getting increased value of your own stack in these knockouts, even though there is some part of the prize pool that's getting out of your reach. I don't think that's going to be a problem for you most of the time. Because you are also, every time people are colliding, you are getting increased equity in that situation. In here I'm going for a steal, and I'm going to bet pretty much any board if my opponent checks, and when my opponent check raises me, I don't see value in carrying on. Need to be quicker. In here, honestly, I don't think that there is anything that I beat with the pocket tens, so it's an easy fold, and that's probably the most horrible flop ever for pocket tens. Trying to extract as much value as we can out of the player that calls too much. Callion 6 is bottom right. I kind of prefer to ISO versus one limper. I think that's going to be pretty close. I was almost out of time to react, so I did the quickest option I had. And full-time need posted flat with ace-jack suited standard for you, Arnie, against 3.5x open from the UTG. I think that's also that when you see a 3.5x open from the UTG, it's going to be from a worse player. It's not standard, and with these stack sizes it gets kind of awkward. So it's going to be a nasty situation. Ace-jack suited was just a bit too pretty of a card. In here, I'm a bit unsure. Actually, the bet sizing could have been a bit bigger so that we would have a better sized stack to shove on the river as value. But when our opponent shoves anyway, and we did crush him pretty well. But that's also something that I think that the money is going in anyways when we are having a king 10 against king queen there, so it doesn't matter in the long run. It doesn't matter in the long run what those exact hands play, but against the whole range of the opponent's hands, then it matters a lot more. And full-time nit, yeah, it's the absolute bottom of my range. So that's something that we can say with confidence, that it's going to be the bottom of my range. And Calleon said that I think a 3.5 big blind could be a standard and a good open raise in micros from a reggie player. People just call too much, I would assume. I don't think that there are reggie players that are opening too much, even though the players that are, or there are players that are playing with a really tight basic playing or basic game plan, and with their game plan it would call for them to open bigger because they are not using all of their spots. I think the most optimal, even in micros, would be a pretty steal heavy game strategy, and that calls for, I think that calls for smaller raise sizes. even when people are calling too much. If people are calling too much pre-flop but they are giving up plenty post-flop, then you are going to print money anyways. But if your play strategy is going to be really tight and really value oriented, easy game plan to go for massive multi-tabling even in the micros, then I think that larger opening sizes would be good in general. I'm getting a nice 4-bet spot with queens on another table that's not visible. And when I get the great 4-bet spot, of course I 4-bet and my opponent just calls and we are then screwed. Like, we are well and truly screwed. My opponent min 3-bets. I 4-bet, biggish, opponent calls. There's a king on the board. I don't think that I can call it. And in here, with the pair of jacks, it's going to be an easy shove. In here, if the opponent would be a really aggressive raiser, this could be a shove, but against a guy that's 50/5, he's going to be really likely to call too wide, and he's going to have a really strong range when he opens. So that's something that we are going to play pretty tightly against this Parfumer when he opens. I think the queen spot is like, when you are seeing it, you are saying instantly that this is what always happens with queens in this spot, but there will be better flops as well. You just remember those flops that like really don't go your way. And Callion says that he's check calling queens almost always on such board with only one pot-sized bet behind. If we assume villain is unknown or fishy, they can have a lot of stuff still, in my opinion. I think the problem is with when we are having jack and a king on the board and no draws, it's going to be that opponents are not that likely to shove their tens or smaller pocket pairs that are not sets. And there are going to be, when opponent just calls a 4-bet, there are going to be king queens, ace queens, or ace kings, and practically the only hands that I'm going to beat are going to be ace jacks, ace queens in the opponent's range. So it's going to be a situation that's, it's going to be closer than it looks, but I think that the opponent general range in that situation is just going to beat me too much. And of course, even if it makes no sense for an opponent to be shoving something like pocket eights there, it doesn't matter that they wouldn't shove pocket eights there. This is an interesting situation. This is a really interesting situation with the knockouts. This is practically only an open because of the knockout value that this guy has, that his there's going to be a decent knockout value. It's a paired board, and I think that I'm going to get rid of the opponent quite often. We're just carrying on applying the pressure here. When he re-raises, I'm thinking about a pocket pair or a jack. And I was pretty wrong about that. That wasn't the first time. I think most opponents that are going or are leaning towards the tight side are going to be folding an ace high on that spot, especially a weak ace high. And actually, Neo, I just remembered that there were knockout specific spots also on the top right when I shoved. I just forgot to discuss about it. Because when you are having a really short stack, like if you are dropping to something like 425 chips in these knockout games, the situation is way more grim than in a regular sit and go if you are having a short stack. Because all of the opponents want to be calling you, and they want to be calling you too wide because of the knockouts. So in a normal game, you can shove wider when you are having the short stack than you can shove in a knockout. Because in a knockout, the people are going too much for the knockouts, especially against short stacks. And even in here, when we had this spot that there's an opponent with just 21 chips, I'm still requiring, because there are still 5 players behind me, I'm still requiring a hand with some value before I can go for the knockout as well. So, and full-time nit, yeah, I mean, even his regular recreational, that 3.5x open from UTG is so strong most of the time. Yeah, I'd say that with the ace-jack suited, it's going to be really close. We are still discussing about one call, and I don't think that it matters that much. It might be a bad call, but it's going to be pretty close. In here, if I'm having a wipe that my opponents are tight, I'm going to open pretty much any 2 cards from the button. And this Robert guy is a pest. I have seen him do the ace-9 suited on a 5-jack-jack board with no flush draws available, but I still think that the guy is going to fold enough so I can still continuation bet, especially when my opponent is checking before me. And in these situations or in these games, if you can see, like we are seeing some of the regs here, that the guys that we are having the most hands against they are playing really tight. So we are exploiting them by playing pretty aggressively and stealing their blinds. What does a nit love? Nit loves an aggressive stealer, and he loves the aggressive stealer so much that he's willing to give all his money and chips away by just folding. So that's what we are going to do. Of course, if we are having some players that are going to be really loose, we are tightening up somewhat, but our general game plan is that you'll still young your own at the late game. So in general, I think that the opponents are going to play too tight, and now I'm getting the Rusa to attack me second time in a row, so I need to be tightening up against him a bit. I don't like it, of course. Of course, but... And against this Perazzi SC1, against him I'm going to carry on being aggro. And I think that there are some nits that if you are abusing them enough, then they'll start like, this stops here. But nope. Some nits are going to be that they are going to give their blinds to you forever, and some nits are that they are giving their blinds, but there is a certain limit that after that they are not willing to give their money away anymore, and they are making a stand with usually something that's pretty stupid. In here we are having some additional knockout value in this situation, but our hand is just terrible and we don't get even close to pot odds. Something like if there would be 450 chips to call, this would be an easier call. And Callan, yeah, that's what I would be hoping for as well. The needier the players are, it's going to be good for a certain type of playing style. In here we don't have a lot of hands. When we are having the ace, it's going to be a bit less likely that our opponent is going to have an ace. And there is plenty of pressure that we can apply. But when we are getting caught, then it's going to suck a lot. In here, when an opponent has shoved a lot, and seems to be a reg that's shoving a lot, I think it's going to be a profitable call anyways. And in a knockout structure, when we are having larger stack than him, it's going to be even better. Bottom of calling range, bottom right, 7-9 off. Yeah, 7-9 off is going to be a call, but I don't know if that's even the bottom. There will be a lot of really crappy looking suited hands, because we are going to get so close to... We are going to get so close to something like 35% chip EV, and there is the additional value in a knockout included, so we are going to need to be wider in that spot than we would need to be in normal game, and I think we are going to mark that hand because that's going to be something that's a really knockout specific hand to look through. On an outside table I was wondering where did my stack go, but... And Neo said that also there's a reg who restills like 90% against me, but folds about 70% according to stats. That's going to be really wild. Really wild adjustments. With Queen Jack off, we are going to be about the smallest stack, and this is going to be the worst competitor. So with Queen Jack off, we are going to call this. We are going to be so far ahead of his range, even though he's a bit of a needy player. I think he's also a reg, so... And Neo, I'd also think that if you are having a re-steal stat against hero, I would really like to check how much do you really have, how much of a sample size you really have. And if you don't have a lot of sample size, the versus hero stats can be extremely misleading. I don't think that most regs are adjusting their games that much. This is a bit of an on the edge play, because both of these guys seem to be pretty sensible, so... And it's going to feel pretty bad, but I think that when opponents are just going to be folding way too much, then a min raise in here is going to make money in the long run. And where was the queen jack hand? It was in this table. And when I said that this Perazzi SC is going to be the worst competitor for us, it's because we are two positions away from the money. And their Chili Pope in here had a small stack, and this guy had the... This is actually on the edge. I don't know if this is a good shove or not. Especially without antes. Even though their stack sizes are low, but I'm a bit unsure. In here, this is going to be quite a special play. And this King Jack suited is going to be good for sure. The board is drier than it seems. And when opponent just limps, I'm finding it's going to be really hard to put my opponent on an ace. Yeah, actually in this case, when there are like opponents that are not 3-betting that much, it's not going to be that good. If there are opponents that are aggressive 3-betters, then shoving it is going to be a winning play. In here, we are going to, with a pocket pair, we are going to call no matter who's in it with us. We are having a pure steal that turns into value on a really dry board. In here we are having value that turns into a bluff. It's the flop. The flop changes a lot on what happens in the hands. In this situation, I think that we are still having showdown equity with pocket nines, and there is no reason to bet, in my opinion. Nine, 7, 6, 5, 4. No, not a straight. 5 high. Not going to be good enough. Pocket nine's not a shove in the bubble. Do you call big stacks 3-bet bottom left? Crap, that would have been a shove. Bottom left, nines is not a shove. It's not a shove because the stack sizes are going to be so big. I think it plays better as a min raise. And actually now in here I noticed that there's going to be the Rusa guy in big blind that has been 3-betting us pretty aggressively, so perhaps min raising that isn't the best play. And Calleon said that checking flop is also fine in nines hand, and it would be a default line for me in position. I think actually that you are completely correct that checking would be the default line and would be probably would be a better line than what I took. Like, it's a meddling hand that if we are making opponent fold something that's not a flush draw, we are getting protection against a flush draw. And something like... And we are getting some protection against overcards. But mostly we are when opponents are calling, they are having better hands, and if they are folding worse hands. So it's going to be a pretty bad place to bet the hand that's a pocket pair, that's a mid pair. And if you are behind, it's going to be really hard for us to outdraw the opponent when we are practically drawing to 2 cards. In here, it's going to be pretty much the opposite of the pocket 9's hand. Like, in this situation, our hand has pretty much no value. And when our hand pretty much has no value on the flop, it makes betting it a bit better because we know what we are doing. We are betting it as a bluff, and the opponent will fold a lot of better hands to us. And Callan, you are correct that Queen Jack and a flush draw will sometimes play aggressive, but then there are also overcards that are not Queen Jack, that are having decent equity against us if they are seeing 2 cards, but otherwise not. This is going to be a really great game because now we are getting to abuse the bubble a lot. And in here against the Shinya, I shoved the turn when I had also the flush draw, because then I can extract the maximum pressure and I should have at least 9 outs most of the time. And Marcus, why the curse is gone. Finally won a poker camp tournament. Congrats! Actually, King 7 should always be a profitable play in there. And we are getting to heads up in a game. That's great. Callan, I don't think that it's possible to be in a poker cam tournament without having your cam open. In here, King Jack is going to block so many of his good hands that he's going to be calling, and it's going to have decent equity against most of the hands. Unfortunately, Ace King is not one of those hands that it will have decent equity against. In here, I defended with 9-3 suited, and that's going to be pretty much the edge for me. And if the opponent is opening a ton, then 9-3 off is going to be a really good. And there is also one of the reasons that I think that the sit and go heads up is going to be so different compared to a lot of the heads up sit and goes, because you can start up with like 5 big blinds deep, and then can also, on the other hand, you can have close to 50 big blinds effectively. So there are a lot of stack sizes that you need to play correctly. But the most important stack sizes are from 5 to 20 big blinds deep. That's the most common matchup in heads up. In here, there's the Robert that's going to call a ton. There's the Rusa that's going to 3-bet a ton. And our hand doesn't have enough value to shove, especially when Robert is going to be such a wild card. Our opponent has been 3-betting us a ton. And I mean a ton. So I was thinking about limping the 8-2 suited to see how he reacts, but I got timed out. This is really annoying that when you are having a session that you are talking at the same time, and if you are having a table with no time bank, it's going to kill you. Callan, I have had a 75 big blind effective stack depth heads up in a 6-max hyper. We got there with... We both eliminated 2 players within 3 hands. So it was really awesome. And when our opponent bets into us, we are going to take a bit of a passive stance and let him have a rope. It's going to be a really nice session when we are still in the bubble, and then there are like 2 heads ups, and we already won 1 heads up, so it's going to be pretty insane, I think. And then we are having a dominating stack on 1 knockout, so it's going to be good. But it's a bit of an insane that you can get to heads up with 75 big blind stack depth, but it happens so rarely. Like, that has happened once, and I have played something like, I think, 50,000 or more 6-max hypers. But it can happen, so. If this guy is shoving even close to correct, then calling with Queen Jack suited is going to be a good play. But if he's too tight, it's going to be minus EV quite quick. And I think that when my opponent is like, I don't have a lot of hands on the opponent, but if my opponent is playing 75% of his small blinds, I'm inclined to think that he knows something. I actually could have also limped this as an abusive line, but we got exactly what we wanted. Like, this is no style points poker at its best. We don't want to get style points for making pretty plays. We want to make the most effective play to get our opponent's equity as we can. Yeah, Callan, like, even versus tight players support to raise fold Queen Jack suited 13 big blinds deep, such an equity monster. Yeah, like, it's not terrible against pretty much any range that our opponent can have. Of course, you can always create like the perfect range to combat just the Queen Jacks, but it's going to be pretty rare. 3 times out of 4 we have been 3-bet. Wonder what he does if we limp. I don't think we can play 100% from the small blind against this guy. He likes to be pretty aggressive, so we are going to pretty much go for a bit of a different strategy. If the opponent is 3-betting that much, 9-8 off is for sure not a call. Not an Ash call for sure. And Kauri says that he likes this guy's playing style. Yeah, it's like I'm... What is he doing? It's like... It's slightly easy in right now against this Tulipa guy, because we can just wait for value, and for the meddling value hands we can just shove, and if we are having a true value hand, then we can min raise and we can get it pretty much all in against anything. And wide shove's not an option either. Yeah, pray for good hands. I don't know what that's called. I probably should ask our our heads up coach, is there going to be a heads up strategy that is all about praying for decent hands? With the king 7 off, we don't need to have a lot of equity when opponent shoves just 2.5 big blinds. Even when we were dominated, we got enough equity for it to be good for us. Kauris, that's interesting in a way, because if you are at the beginning when you are starting a match against me, if you are like shoving every hand against me, you are playing pretty well against my general readless strategy that is made that way because opponents in general are going to fold way too much in heads up. So when I'm trying to play small ball and play a lot of hands, someone that shoves a ton when we are having a short stacked heads up matchup is going to get some edge early on. But when I adjust the strategies having such huge leaks that we can just go for value then, and when we are going for value, the strategy is going to leak so much. But against the general strategy that I have, that I'm going to test my opponents a lot, it's going to play really well against it, and it's going to be a pretty good counter at the start. But if an opponent plays a pretty good counter against my strategy, then I'm going to adjust, and then the holes will show up. And call with 8-9 off and do it twice in a row. That's like twice in a row with about 10 big blinds or more. That's going to be a really losing play for him. And connected 2 flush draw is nuts. Yeah, that's kinda on what they're saying why the 10-5 off is the best hand in the game. Because every straight in the game needs either a 10 or a 5. And you are having 2 flush options, so... And Rusa has been so aggressive that Queen 6 suited is going to be an insta-call. And we had like a huge stack with something like 7,000 chips, and all the other had stack size starting with ones, and now we are the shortest stack, but this happens sometimes. I'm trying to abuse him by, like, the 6-4 off is not a good enough hand to go for a shove, but it might be good enough to go for a raise fold if my opponent folds too much. But like, it's going to be an interesting situation to think if an opponent knows my general playing style, that is going to be aggressive start for the heads up. If my opponent knows that I'm generally starting really aggressively the heads ups and he shoves pretty much every hand at the start, and when I'm adjusting and quitting to shove every hand, if he's tightening up a lot at that point as well, then my counter of going for thinner value is going to be really bad. So it's all about adjusting and readjusting. And we are getting heads up again. 4 out of 6 to heads up. That's going to be a decent session, I'd say. Unfortunately, these are the $3.5 games, so... And we noticed that in these situations, I got like 1 knockout at the start. of the game. And when I won the heads up, I got the opponent's knockout and then I got my own knockout back. So winning these games is slightly better than in regular structure sit and goes. And we can see like this guy with 3 knockouts is El Holscher. I think he's going to be quite close to... Not quite close to break even, but he's losing something like $2 for a game. And I think that evens up the variance a bit. That you can also get money from the knockouts. I'm a bit unsure because this also makes it that the prize pool is a bit more top heavy, which usually increases variance. Let's go for slightly higher games. I probably should have had a break here, but... Marcus Y, what do you think about the New Stars lobby and tournament lobby? I can't find anything and I can't find any settings and I can't use it, so... I don't like it that much. But the problem pretty much is that the PokerStars has said that you will need to move to the next, or you will need to move to the other structure anyway, so if I need to move to the other lobby later, then it's going to be good to get some experience with it right now. Even if I don't like it. And most of the stuff I use works, especially when I don't use the Poker or Table Ninja to register to tournaments. Then even Table Ninja works with the Table Ninja 1 works with the New Stars. And Calleon says, does Hold'em Manager 2 and PT4 handle knockout monies correctly these days? Poker Tracker 4 handles knockout money for simple knockout tournaments if you are having the import tournament structures or import tournament summaries on PokerStars or write the tournament summaries to disk. Then it works correctly. But if the knockouts are like progressive knockouts, the progressive knockouts don't work because it only saves how many knockouts did you get. You can't save the amount of money you won with the knockouts. And that would be something that I don't believe either of the software has done well. And Neo says that Hold'em Manager 2 implements the knockout money correctly. I wonder that if the softwares are doing the ICM calculations with the knockouts in mind. Because it will affect some of the ICM situations a bit. Or it will affect some of the ICM situations. Yeah, Kauris, I looked at it as well that there's Malexi. What? But luckily he's not the player. And we hit the set. Unfortunately, the board is pretty much dead. But our opponent wants to re-raise us. That is great news. If I ship it here, I can get the money in against the flush draw. If I don't, then it's going to be nasty on the river because I don't have position. In position, this would be so much better. Yeah! That's the first knockout for the $7 games. opponent pretty much played it perfectly for us. This time that we had a really strong hand. I think that the opponent min re-raising us on the flop is something that's not good, but if we have bet and we bet again on the flop, I think it's going to be good for our opponent to call with king queen off, because there are generally, I think the general gameplay or game plan is for too many players to just fire one barrel and then give up on the turn. And when they're giving up on the turn, then you can steal the pot pretty often. And Caleon, yeah, that's the problem with the hand, that if we are going to call the turn bet, then we pretty much need to check the river and opponent can get to a free showdown. And Caleon, you are also correct in there that there's one thing to think about. Think in turn is also that if the villain has a hand to call versus shove, does he still value shove the river? I think that in general, when our opponent min re-raises us on the flop, I think that it adds more weight to some of the overpair hands, and on the turn when the queen hits, it's going to be pretty bad news for those, and I don't think that we are getting 2 bets from medium pairs, like no matter how we play it. I don't think that our opponent would bluff shove or value shove the medium pocket pairs. If they have a queen, they are going to probably value shove it or value bet it on the river if there's no ace hitting. But if there is a flush draw and the flush draw does not come through, the flush draw can call on the turn, but they can't call on the river. And also, if it's a flush draw that comes through, we are still, when it's a backdoor flush, we pretty much need to still call with. We need to call the shove, so we are playing, when we are shoving turn, we are playing better against their range in general, I think. But that's I think that's pretty good thing to think about, like how I'm going to screw my opponent with his whole range. Like, that is what poker is all about. Or tournament poker is all about screwing other people out of their equity. And increasing our own equity in the process. But when we are increasing our own equity, we always need to get the equity from other players. The hand was the pocket fours. Bet pre-flop and hitting a set, and then trying to extract most value out of the hand out of position, which usually is not easy. But luckily our opponent has a good hand. But I think, like with a hand like this, it doesn't matter do we shove the turn or do we check for the river, because I think that the opponent is going to be betting the river anyway with such a hand, but against his whole range is going to be the different case. And hello Repo as well. And as we can see, I think the general level of play is pretty close to the general level of play in the $3.5 games. I think in these games we can see that there are still plenty of bad players that are going to spew their equity away. So I think these games are pretty beatable still. I'm going to go for a bluff here. If it doesn't go through, then I'm going to pretty much give it up on the turn because there are two flush draws. And only when the flush draws do not hit, then I'm going to carry on with another barrel, because when there are two flush draws, there are just too many hands that the opponent can. There are just too many hands that our opponent can call us with. And in general, if we are playing against a random player, I'm caring less about I'm caring less about what would be balanced and what am I projecting with my line, and does my line make sense? Because I don't think that the general random player will look at my line that much as they are looking at their own hand strength. And when our opponents are mostly looking at their own hand strength, we can go for some quite exploitative lines. And I in general think that, for example, betting the river, especially in position when the draws are busted, it's going to be a really profitable play in a draw heavy board. And I think in general my strategy in the sit and goes is going to be quite a bit more aggressive than the strategy in most books. And I think in general going for a more aggressive strategy means that you are at one good point for being aggressive is that the regs don't bother you as much. You are still winning some equity from the regs seats when you are going aggressive and they are playing generally pretty needy. And also, if you are keeping your pot size small, you can also increase your equity against random players that are calling too much. There's actually one point that it's going to be close. We are having position and this player is likely going to be quite bad. So we are isolating him and we'll see what we'll do with position. If I would have been on the button in this one as well, I would have isolated. We are hitting quite decently. And I don't think that when an opponent limp calls that this board will hit him that well in general. Also, there would have been a good option to check because our hand is pretty much a draw and there are plenty of good cards. And if it would have been the other way around, that there would be 10 and a jack and a queen and a king, then I would be more likely to check behind, because then there are a lot more good cards for me to come than the other way around. But when my hand is on that way, I'm more apt to bluffing with the Jack 10 on a King Queen board. Because pretty much the pair outs are not helping me that much, if at all. So, but if it's going to be the other way around, the pair outs are going to usually give me some help. And Repo asks about how wide would I go on button versus a limp. I think it depends a lot. It depends a lot on what I think the range my opponent is limping and also what position he limps from. If he limps from late position, I'm going to be more aggressive than from a UTG. And if there is something like UTG or UTG plus 2, I'm not going to ISO with something like ace deuce off or something that I can ISO if he's limping from late position. But in general, I would like to have a hand that plays pretty well when I'm ISOing, but I think I'm ISOing in general a bit more aggressively than the general reg. Especially because the guys that are leaking most of their equity, they are these beat Howens that are playing all of the hands with aggressively. They are going to leak a lot of equity. And if we are playing against them more, then we are gaining equity. If I would be on the big blind, I would probably flat these. I think it's going to be it's going to be easier to play against normal when he's likely to have quite a tight range in there. And Calleon says that the blinds also matter. Yeah, the blind size also... The blinds also matter in the ISO spots because the more the blinds are playing, the worse it's going to be for us. In here, there's a really loose player limping, and I think that in this hand, we're having 10 times more behind. This is going to be really nasty if the opponent shoves because we can pretty much never call, but I think with a suited ace, because of the likelihood that we are going to bust one of these players is going to be so big in general, and when we completely miss the board, it's not going to be horrible to... Oh! Out of time bank again. That would have been a call on the top left table. And that's a bit annoying because now I notice that the cogwheels of my head are now spinning and I'm getting slightly tilted when I didn't have time to call that hand because it would have been an instant call, and that's something that I think I lost a lot of equity in that hand because I couldn't be, or I didn't act quick enough. 15 seconds, 12 seconds. So I have just missed on my time bank on one table. And that's, as I said last time around, it's really annoying when you are missing out on your time bank. In here with pocket tens, we are going to be calling at least. I think we are going to call even a second street when the flop goes check, check. He bets on the turn. I think that there are going to be worse hands that he's going to be betting. And Calleon, how would you approach flop like ace-10-6 without the flush draw in the ace-9 suited hand? I think I'd say I'm going to approach it pretty carefully, and if possible I'm going to pot control those kind of boards. When there are two opponents and it has been limp raise, and if I would be calling, so there would be two players that are going to have decent hands. In here, pocket fours, it's going to be on the edge because of this. This is a really big stack, but I think against these other stacks, like the average stack size is going to be so small. And I think even for this guy, it's going to be really hard to abuse if we are shoving something like small pocket pairs against this guy in this situation. Even though we are leaking information, it's not easy for them to utilize, especially when this is going to be about the first times they are going to see us. But for example, for the ace-9 suited hand, like the best we can hope for is going to be an instant flush on board. Flush draws are going to be, I think, on the close second, or a flush draw with an ace, so we are having a pair of aces and a combo draw. That's going to be really strong. And with the ace-9 suited, then it's going to be two pair hands, or actually I think two pair hands are even ahead of combo draws. Then there are going to be something after the combo draws, there are going to be the draws with flush draws without combo, and also after that it's going to be pair of ace. Actually, I think pair of nines, if the pair of nines is the top pair, that's going to be stronger for us in general than hitting the ace. But if 9 is like the bottom card of the board, then it's not going to be as valuable for us than an ace. That could be something for HRC to chew through. And I must say that when I have been playing a lot of Spinnet Goes lately, it might be that my general game plan has been going to not avoid collisions that much because of the ICM. It might have gone a bit overboard. We are betting small because we want to have this studs Lonnie to be on board. And we are wanting to have as much of his stack as we can. Actually, when he has had a really high aggression frequency, that has also been a point to just check and let the opponent do the betting. I thought that Queen Jack off is not going to be strong enough to be shoved without... I thought that Queen Jack off is not going to be strong enough to be shoved without antes, but no, we are not having antes there. So I was correct that we are not having antes, but this calls for a special play because there are a player that has been 3-betting so much, but this is going to be horrible. Horrible situations all around. I think like the Queen Jack suited would have been an easy shove, Queen 10 suited would have been an easy shove, but Queen Jack off, I'm a bit unsure. I need to check that. But that's something that usually it's good because those situations are pretty easy to check with Hold'em Resources calculator. When there are easy situations to check, then it's going to be something that you'll need to just take into your repertoire to check those situations and adjust your ranges accordingly. I think like now when I'm thinking about it, having or playing poker on a live stream the first time in a week is probably not the best idea. There are things that are making you feel a bit rusty at times. Now I'm hoping that this guy is opening and in here, because the Reaper is going to be, he's going to be the guy that's calling us the most. He's going to be a random. And I think that then I'm going for just maximum value out of this guy. And I don't care if this guy is a reg and he knows that I'm having a monster then, because I think I'm going to in general get better odds to get a lot of chips in from Aharen and the Reaper with just min raising. But I'd say there are a bit too many situations that Kaleon has commented on, and I think Kaleon has had really good points on most of the situations. And I tend to agree more with Kaleon than my own actions on the table, so... And I'm usually trying to explain when I'm agreeing more with him and trying to explain the situations. There are... Of course, when we are playing like... Now it's going to be something like 12 sit and goes. On 12 sit and goes there are going to be about 600 hands. And of course every player misplays hands. There will be timeouts, there will be stupid stuff happening. And there will be stupid stuff happening. This is something interesting. I don't think that he's going to have that great of a hand. I think this is going to be dead money most of the time. And when it's going to be dead money most of the time, then shoving 10-7 suited is going to be okay. Because also this guy's limping range is not that strong. I'm even tempted to... If this would have been suited, I would have completed for sure. But unsuited, no. Not going to touch that. Especially on the bubble. And Kaleon said that, like I called some time ago, 10 big blinds sub with 10 for suited. Though it did look like ace-10 suited when table popped up. Yeah, it's also horrible when you have played you have taken a really aggressive line on a table, and then when you are on the river you are noticing, oh crap, I'm in here with ace-4 off. When you have thought that it's pair of aces. That's like, ah! And I think like one of the most frustrating things is to do a really quick action and then notice that you have done completely the wrong action, and that could have been avoided by just using a half a second more to think like. And those mistakes, they are pretty tilting when they're happening during your session, that you know instantly after the hand that you have screwed the hand up. That's usually really hard to deal with mental game wise and keep your mental game intact. Though I must say that my shoving the crappy hands have been reduced a lot when I have changed to a deck that will have a lot of when I change to a deck that will have a lot of big numbers, the bigger the numbers, the better. And usually when I play, so there are also... Usually when I play, I'm using the whole screen. Like now on the stream, I'm using a smaller portion of my screen, but I'm like trying to do everything to get the information I want as quickly as possible. In here, it's the big stack against the big stack, and this has a potential to be horrible. And this is also something that I think that it's going to be profitable as a shove. And I remember that J.R. Ferrio had been really aggressive on the game previously, and when he had been really aggressive on the game previously, then I'm opting for a shove rather than a min raise, because if I'm min raise folding here with a hand like King Queen, then I think I'm burning money if the opponent is really aggressive. The table chat. I think it's interesting to see how many mental game leaks there are with opponents. How much mental game leaks there are with our opponents that they are showing us with. It's actually close. Ace-4 off would be a instant shove. But I'm unsure with King-3 off. I don't think that this guy is having a strong range to limp. But I'm also unsure. Did this guy give this Josef a walk? Yeah, this makes no sense. Like, if it's 3 big blinds deep, you are not risking practically any equity on your... Or you are not risking a lot of your stack. And it's going to be knockout. This is a... Even if he has 2-3 off, I think this is a horrible fold. The knockouts will give enough extra equity for it to be really good. Callion, I think it depends a lot on how aggressive the opponents are. And we are getting at least one $7 game to the money. That's always great. I'm more apt to take risks when we are through the bubble. It's a bit harder to play post-flop on an ICM heavy situation because you are always going to be slightly guessing. Usually with ICM wise, it's going to be better for you. It's going to be better for you to play smaller pots. Usually ICM doesn't penalize that much if you are playing small pots against your opponents. That much as it penalizes for playing for your whole stack. Especially if you are having a medium stack. But also some opponents, especially later on, like on Callion's games, they would know it. And when they know that this ace is a horrible card. Don't hate the player, hate the ace. Yeah, Neo, you are correct that that's a prime example of a knockout specific spot because an opponent can fold. Could fold in a different structure. Ace deuce against a guy that I remember to be really aggressive on the early game is going to be good enough to apply pressure when we are three-handed. But that's also something that in a normal sit and go, if opponent has 3 big blinds, I think that if the opponent is random, there might be a point to still shove any two, because I think in general opponents are going to probably be folding too much. Hello, Ahille. Callaghan, today I had a very fishy big stack in 18 man. In forehand deed, made it 3 times non-all-in from cutoff with 3 to 4 big blind stack and shoved flop, and he folded every time after calling pre-flop. That's probably the best customer a poker pro can have on these 18 mans. And then when we are having a great hand and opponent is shoving, this is going to be the situation when you are, yeah! And this is actually a spot that we are still not winning practically anything. Because I think that opponent probably should not generally shove it, but against me that's going to be a good shove. Or against a player that plays like me, it's going to be a good shove. But even that's going to be that we are just quite lucky to get it in. Ahille, it's going to be on our YouTube channel later on, so don't you worry. And there are a lot of videos. I think there are almost every day there is something new on the channel. So don't worry even if you miss something. In here, the flop is horrible. Even though we can get some value out of one... Actually, we are getting some value out of one club hand, so... And now the 10 of clubs is going to be another horrible card. And when he shoves, it's the easiest fold I have had yet to make. Yeah, Callan, that's also correct, that if you are using the live session to your advantage, you are asking questions and you are... Neo asked top right, force is not a call. I think something like 6s or 7s would be a call. We can review that later on. This is also something we are having quite decent showdown equity. Then king comes. It's more likely that our opponent will have big cards because he has limp called. And yeah, he did have the middle pair. No thoughts of checking the aces on 282. Deuce 8 deuce at these stakes. I find people barrel off on these boards putting you an ace king or 2 big cards. Which table was it, Repo? If you say that, then I can check if I can still find the hand. In general, I think it depends a lot on how I think I'm going to get most value. In here, even though I have an open-ended straight draw, I don't calculate jack to be an out in here. Because jacks are going to give a 4 straight on the board and aces are going to be. So I'm having about 11 outs, 12 outs there, so... Ah! I needed to remember that I have no time bank on the top right. That's one of the worst plays equity-wise in this session in here. Unsuited 7 queen I wouldn't be shoving, but suited I think it's going to be good enough. And Callion said that it's nasty side of checking on the ace queen X board with pocket nines, and it's not that nasty even. Because there are not a lot of really bad cards for you. Whoa, I win it without heads up. Queen 7 suited. I can try to check it if I can still find it from the latest. I just need to... I'm hating this tournament that I'm having remaining because I have no time bank in here. And that's going to be slightly nasty. And Ahille said that the Reaper is a fish. I think he's... More than likely he's going to be a good customer because he's proudly displaying his bronze star. I think that this three-handed table is one of the better three-handeds that you can get. Back at chip lead, back at chip lead. I have actually timed out twice in this tournament with a really value hand, so... It's not good, it's not good. That's usually a telltale sign because if you are having a bronze star in these games, you are having 303 VPPs, and I think if you are playing like bronze star is 100 points a month, so that's something like if the opponent plays 34 of these games, even if he's one tabling, it shouldn't take that long for him to play 34 games, so... And now he has been really aggressive against me, so... I need to move my ranges to more value-oriented ranges, and then there will be some limps, and try to see how he reacts to me limping. But I think like these stats that he's not stealing practically anything and calling a lot, that's something that's more of a telltale sign that he's going to be a good customer than this bronze star is for the Reaper. But usually, even if the player is a good player, if they're having a bronze star, they are taking it out, so they are more interested in customizing the playing experience. But when it's at default, it's on. And that's going to be a horrible call. With about equal stacks calling a shove with king-queen suited, it's going to be pretty minus EV. I'm thinking about limping from button and limping from SP, and now I'm trying to get like the knockout from the Reaper. Getting a cheap knockout because this guy is also folding some of his big blinds. But not this time. If he calls, I'm getting such great pot odds in here. It's like 1 in 10 that I require. And I'm getting better than that with 3-4 off. Especially when this guy doesn't have that much incentive to bluff me out of the pot. Because he would need to win this guy's hand as well. And so it doesn't make any sense like I'm having the not second worst hand. Like deuce 3 would be even worse, or not even second not worst hand, this is third not worst hand. No, actually they are all equal, so it's the not worst hand. All of the 4 highs are equal because we are playing the board. So I would have no chance at all of winning that pot. and he colluded with you correctly. I don't think that it's going to be correct, because in these games your stack will have also equity. So if you are having a better hand than your opponent in these games, I think it's better for you to play it a bit aggressively, so you can get more value out of your opponent. And this 9 is a horrible card. Like the first hour on the 350s, we got pretty much easy decisions, and in these games we have had quite a few times that there is the miracle not worst card on the deck that arrives on the river. And I think like every 9 in that spot is going to be a really bad card, because there are going to be so many situations that 3-6 off. Crap. This is not a Nash shove. I'm slightly tempted though, because this player doesn't seem to be that good of a player. Calleon, that was probably on the King 5. I think that when I'm having 2 pairs, I just can't fold to my opponent donking. I think 2 pairs is going to be just too strong too often. And this is also one reason why you'll never giving up in these games. Like, and then we split the pot. I thought that we are never giving up because we are getting a decent stack to play with. Our opponent limp calls with 3 deuce off. I think Kauris likes these players. And then we split the pot again. If I would be a tilting player, that could have been tilt inducing. Like against this player, we cannot play crappy hands, so we require good hands against this player. Because he's calling pretty much everything. And when he's calling pretty much everything, then when we are having a decent value hand, we are going to try to extract the maximum value out of it. And Jack 8 off, or Jack 8 suited, it's not going to even be a bad call. And Chip Leader, do you have any country-based reads? It's actually quite funny when the country-based reads are also... I think they are also adjusting a bit. And when the opponent is folding so much on the flop, that could have been a good spot to start to pretty much limp anything crappy. And then raise, call or shove everything decent. And like, this is if I'm having some fold equity, this is going to be better as a shove than as a raise fall. And maybe he was going for a limpet go with 2-3 off to get you fold more. Yeah, right. And JR Ferrio is a very good customer. I tend to agree with that. But when I'm not having enough liquid to drink, I'm saying that we are having an 8-minute break before the analysis part. So we are back with the analysis of the hand that we have played and marked in 8 minutes. So Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with the analyses in a moment.